You have greatness within you. You are powerful. You are limitless. You are strong. You are courageous. You are love. Welcome to the Reconnect to Your Greatness podcast. Enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me for a brand new podcast, Reconnect to Your Greatness. Super excited to be joined today by Dr. Justin Marchegiani. We'll call him Dr. J to keep it simple. Perfect. Dr. J, thank you so much for your time today. How are you?
I'm doing great, Ryan. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Really excited to be here today.
Awesome. Excited. And so I'm just going to read a quick introduction and then we'll dive in.
Sure.
Dr. Dre is a graduate of the University of Massachusetts at Amherst with a degree in kinesiology and pre-medical studies. Dr. J completed his doctorate degree in chiropractic from Life West University, and he's a licensed doctor of chiropractor. What I'm really excited is to dive into some of your postgraduate study, which was in the area of clinical nutrition, rehabilitative exercise, and functional medicine. He's providing the cutting edge technique. So without further ado, Dr. J, let's dive into this.
Awesome. Let's do it.
We want to help people reconnect to their greatness. And I know you're an expert on functional medicine. Maybe that's a good place to start to dive into this. What is functional medicine? How do you help people?
Great question. So out of the gate, functional medicine is really just root cause medicine. It's basically looking at the stressors and the impediments to your body's ability to heal and addressing them, right? So chiropractic, functional medicine, naturopathic medicine, there's a vitalistic philosophy behind it, meaning your body's set on autopilot to heal. We're just trying to come in there and remove the impediments, right? And so from a chiropractic standpoint, or naturopathic, we're looking at physical, chemical, and emotional stressors that could be holding the body back. So physical things could be pain issues. It could be inactivity, right? Maybe you're exercising too much, right? Chronic pain. It could be things on the emotional side, whether you're just sick and tired of being sick and tired, family stress, financial stress. And then of course, on the chemical, or I call it hidden inflammation side, this could be food allergens. This could be gut inflammation, gut infections, inadequate enzyme or stomach acid levels, just poor nutrition as a whole. And again, these things, they could be under the radar because most people, they're like, hey, am I stressed? No, I'm sitting on the beach all week. But you could be eating a lot of inflammatory foods. You could have a gut infection. You could have toxicity issues. And there could be a lot of hidden inflammation going on, even though your body emotionally is perceiving a pretty stress-free environment. So the goal really is just looking at all these stressors and trying to come in there, set the foundation of a healthy diet and lifestyle, and start to remove these stressors and get the person's physiology and hormones and biochemistry in order so they can heal and do what they want to do in life.
Yeah, love it. Love it. Yeah, I like kind of this triangle, right?
Yeah.
Or this holistic approach that you described. And you provided some excellent examples of maybe some sticking points, right? What happens if a person is stuck in multiple different ways? How do you balance that to bring the body into alignment?
Yeah, I tell patients all the time, you have the right to have more than one issue going on at the same time. So the first thing I do is I try to figure out the patient's why, right? So a lot of times people want to do, or have something in their life and their health issues are preventing them from doing that thing. Right. And so I try to figure out what's their why, right? Is it just they want to go and have more energy because being in a sick, tired, inflamed body stinks? Is it something just that apparent? Is it they're in pain, they can't play with their kids? Is it they don't have the energy to function well at work and perform optimally? So what's their why? And so that's important because if I'm like, hey, you need to do this diet because of X, Y, and Z, or I'm like, hey, you got to do this diet so your back doesn't hurt you so you can golf 18 holes this weekend. Like, what is it, right? So you got to build that why. And then you need a good clinical framework because there's a lot of things, a lot of inputs that you're taking in, right? Things that the patient's doing that may be an issue, and you have to have a clinical framework. And so I kind of have like a 3-body system approach. This has kind of been coined out there, but I like to look at one, make sure the diet's dialed in, make sure our diet's nutrient dense, it's anti-inflammatory, it's low toxin, we have good blood sugar stability, we're getting enough nutrition, we're able to digest and break down our food, we're sleeping good, we're drinking good, we're hydrating good, we're sleeping good. That's kind of like foundation on the lifestyle side. Now from there, we kind of stack up. And we can look at hormones, whether it's adrenals, thyroid, female or male hormones. We can look at the gut, digestion, and immune because 80% of the immune system's there. And then we can also look at other kind of nutrient issues that may be present, whether it's detoxification issues with glutathione or methylation, whether it's mitochondrial issues, whether it's neurotransmitter issues, or whether it's another type of weirder toxicity, a more nuanced toxicity like heavy metals or mold or mycotoxins. And so I kind of have that clinical framework, and that kind of allows me to work with the patient and not miss anything and just kind of really, cross my T's, dot my I's as they go along.
Yeah. What's interesting is I know you have experience kind of more in the acute injury side that I read on your website, and yet you have seemed to also expand into this chronic, which I think is really chronic inflammation that's causing a lot of these issues. And the catalyst could be from some different things. Can you speak to, kind of what chronic inflammation signs somebody may need to look out for?
Yeah, so all chronic inflammation is this. Imagine we have this metaphorical stress bucket, right? In the research, they call this allostatic load, right? This is just all of your stressors in your stress bucket. Now, depending on kind of where your genetic predisposition is, right? Your genetic constitution, do you have a big bucket or a small bucket? Do you have a higher capacity to handle stress or a lower capacity? So when you start adding these stressors in there, it could be gluten sensitivity. It could be blood sugar issues because you're skipping meals or you're going too low calorie. It could be over-exercising. It could be food allergens. It could be gut infections. It could be low stomach acid. These are all stressors that go in that stress bucket. And so metaphorically, when that stress bucket starts to overflow, this is where symptoms start to express themselves. And so the idea that symptoms are the first sign that something's wrong isn't true. It's a fallacy because that bucket has to have a lot of things stacked up before symptoms start to occur. So it's kind of rewiring the idea that symptoms are actually a late stage indicator that something is going on, not an early stage. And then number two, you don't just look at that one symptom and spot treat it. Oh, my back's hurting, ibuprofen. No, you have to actually start reducing the inflammatory load in that stress bucket. And that's where, having a good new patient consult and really looking at the foundational low-hanging fruit that I kind of mentioned with diet, lifestyle, sleep, digestion, and then looking deeper at the hormones because our adrenals play a big load. Like the adrenals sit on top of the kidneys. They're part of your stress handling system, right? We've heard of like the parasympathetic and sympathetic. That's like parasympathetic, we call it like the vagus nerve. It's like the recharge, the break, the relaxation. The sympathetic is the go, 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 go. And people that have their adrenals burnt out, whether it's chronic high or low cortisol, excess adrenaline issues, their body's more in this catabolic state versus anabolic. In other words, they're breaking down faster than they're building up. And so we first have to kind of shift this metabolism of break down here and build up here. We kind of have to switch that. So they're more anabolic than they're catabolic. They're building back faster and better than they are breaking down.
Yeah. Dr. J, I think you made some excellent points there that I just want to reinforce to the listeners. And that is, it's okay to have more than one symptom.
Yes.
Wow. It sounds simple, but that's so powerful. Like, hey, it's okay to, maybe we need to make some improvements here, or some adjustments here, or some tweaks there, right? Like, that's really powerful because I think to your point about, hey, let's not just treat the symptom. Let's get to the root cause. Yeah. If there's more than one root, we can't change the fruit unless we change the root. But if we need to change the roots, right, then it's important to identify that. Yeah.
And when you're looking at the symptom manifestation downstream, it's like, of course, in conventional medicine, it's like, oh, I have this pain, ibuprofen. I have a mood issue. Here's Lexapro. Oh, I have a hormonal imbalance. Here's a birth control pill, or here's some horse estrogen, right? Like we're just spot treating these things down at the bottom. And even in natural medicine world, oh, I have some pain. Here's some frankincense or curcumin, right? That's still better because at least there's not a side effect. It doesn't kill 20,000 people a year like ibuprofen does, taken properly. So at least it's better. And if you combine it and you go upstream and you look at the different systems, whether it's the hormones, right, the adrenals, digestive, immune, toxicity, you want to actually look at the systems. You want to have a system-based approach. And then from the systems, we also look at the underlying stressors. That's that stress bucket and the physical chemical stressors that fill up that stress bucket. That's the allostatic load right there.
Gotcha. Love it. That makes a lot of sense. So let's dive into the gut microbiome because I know that you're an expert on that. And let's get granular here. What would you say is the top one or two symptoms, issues, problems that people come to you? They say, Dr. J, I'm experiencing this. And you go, okay, gut microbiome may be out of homeostasis.
Well, definitely. I mean, anyone that has bloating, constipation, diarrhea, just indigestion, the food doesn't sit well after they eat, they're excessively gassy, burpy, bloaty, right? I mean, these are like, telltale signs. Now, the problem is half of all the symptoms that may be emanating from the intestines, from the gut, are extraintestinal symptoms, meaning brain fog, fatigue, depression, anxiety, sleep issues. And so this can be a little bit hard because if someone's coming in and they have constipation or diarrhea, it's not a hard sell to say, we got to look at your gut. Of course, they're kind of on board. There's an intuition there. But when someone's coming in with brain fog and depression and they're not sleeping well, and then you're trying to connect that back to your gut, this is why I kind of dispel all my, what I think is like the issue. I always try to hold it back, you know what I mean? And just still test and look for all the major areas to see, all right, is there an issue in the gut? Is there an issue here? Because sometimes you surprise yourself.
Right. Yeah, I like that. Not being too tied into any one thing. So you can keep that 30,000 foot view.
Exactly. That's super important. Correct.
Yeah. Type 3 diabetes. I've heard you mention this, and this is incredible. I've never heard anybody speak about this. Can you share with the listeners a little bit about kind of what your interpretation is of type 3 diabetes, and then maybe some of the scientific literature that lends itself towards this?
Yeah, so this has kind of been notated in the literature probably for the last decade or so, is that insulin resistance is part of, type 2 diabetes, right? So type 2, it's like you're making enough insulin, right? So let's kind of break it down. Type 1 diabetes, that's typically an autoimmune condition, tends to affect kids, usually at the age of 10. That's about how long it takes for the beta cells of the pancreas to get destroyed. It's an autoimmune attack. So your pancreas gets destroyed by your immune system. And then those cells, the beta cells, aren't able to make insulin. Therefore, your blood sugar goes really high and you end up losing a lot of weight and you tend to pass out. And it's clear, okay, your blood sugar is high. You have type 1 diabetes. You can run an antibody test and see it. Okay, got it. That's type 1. That's usually young kids. Now we have type 2. And so this is an insulin resistance thing where you're actually making a lot of insulin. But what happens is your cell gets numb to it over time. So it's kind of like, my analogy I give time to time, it's like ringing your neighbor's doorbell and running away, right? And you hide behind the tree, you're a little kid, you're snickering. Well, after a couple of times, they stop opening the door because they get it. The kids next door are being annoying. Let's just whatever, right? And that's kind of what your cells do. They're just like, all right, we're just not going to open up. We're not going to let that glucose come in. That glucose just accumulates in the bloodstream. And when you have high levels of glucose in the bloodstream, it creates glycation, it creates free radical damage, it can make the cells stick together. So you start to get clotting, maybe stroke issues, macular degeneration, essentially create a creme brulee of all the proteins in your vasculature, right? Think of the steakhouse, they put the creme brulee, they bring the blowtorch out, right? And you get that oxidation, it starts to brown on the top of the cream. That's what's happening in your vasculature, right? It's called advanced glycation end products. AGES kind of is the acronym. So this is what happens when you have high levels of blood sugar. Not to mention insulin itself is a growth factor. So it's going to cause cells to grow. So you increase your risk of cancer. You increase your risk of, if you're a female, polycystic ovarian syndrome. As a guy, you increase your risk of high levels of estrogen through aromatase. Aromatase gets upregulated with high levels of insulin. So you start to get gynecomastia, man boobs. You start to get lower testosterone, weaker muscles, all that stuff, moody, emotional, across the board. Now, type 3 diabetes is just this continuum of insulin resistance now happening in the brain. So now certain parts of the brain that would metabolize and use glucose for fuel loses the ability to lose glucose for fuel. That's what's happening there. And in your brain, it's really important. There's this enzyme called insulin degrading enzyme. So part of what insulin degrading enzyme does, it helps clean up insulin. So imagine like you're a janitor, right? You have all this insulin on the floor, right? And you mop it all up, your mop's saturated, right? Well, you can't mop anything else up. The problem is that insulin degrading enzyme also cleans up plaque in the brain, beta amyloid plaques, et cetera. So when you saturate that mop with all this insulin, and you can't get the glucose in there to use it, but two, that enzyme isn't there to clean up other parts of the brain, so extra plaque and inflammation can form as well.
Wow. That is absolutely incredible. I've never heard that breakdown before in regards to, the type 3 diabetes function in the brain. So what I'm hearing you say is not only is my brain not being optimized to use the glucose or use the energy that it needs.
You have a fuel issue, correct?
Mm-hmm. Right. Fuel issue. You're also kind of limiting your immune system of your brain to clean up that stuff that's not supposed to be there anymore.
Bingo. Correct. 100%. That's it.
And so how does that manifest then for the average person? I would assume brain fog, memory issues. What does that look like?
Bingo. Yeah. Any type of early onset Alzheimer's or dementia or cognitive impairment, any of that stuff. And then of course, anytime you get inflammation in the brain, right, your astrocytes are kind of this blood-brain barrier, and you start to activate what's called the glial cells. These are the immune cells in the brain. You're going to just increase your chance of vascular issues, slower blood flow, strokes, any type of cognitive impairment. Plus, if you have a lot of food allergens, especially gluten, there's a lot of studies on gluten decreasing blood flow up to the frontal cortex. And so when you inflame your brain, you also decrease blood flow, decrease oxygenation. You can, have lesions, just abnormal tissues, just not functioning well. Right. And you can see this. Dr. Amen talks about this with some of the SPECT scans as well.
Yeah. For mothers and fathers out there that are trying to get their kids to eat healthy, right? As you started to say about the prefrontal cortex, I'm thinking, wow. So for young kids that have an unidentified gluten allergy, or their insulin levels are spiking up, maybe from unhealthy eating of sugars, is that also going to limit their development of their prefrontal cortex as they start to, age and their brain is developing?
100%. So most kids, they literally live their day with a blood sugar roller coaster. It's carbohydrates in the morning, blood sugar's up, they're bouncing off the walls, they crash, that creates more cravings. And then, so as their blood sugar's up and down, so is their mood, so is their energy, so is their focus. And it's worse in boys because boys just naturally have a harder time focusing. They probably shouldn't be in a classroom setting until they're at least 9 or 10. So I have 2 boys. I have 2 and 4, Hudson and Aiden. So I'm a parent. I get it, right? The problem with most parents today is they fail this one thing. Your job as a parent is to give your kids what they need, not what they want. Too many kids look at their kids and they project what they would want vicariously through their kids. Oh, I would love this. I would love that. That's not your job as a parent. Give them what they need. And so they need good proteins. They need good fats. They need nutrient dense foods. They need you to set the table in regards to being an example of what this looks like. So having a family meal, eating these foods together, having good, healthy foods in the household. Your kid can't drive. They don't have their own money. They can't go to the store. So if you create the environment and set the habits, it becomes easy and automatic.
Got it. Awesome. So let's do kind of a case study, right? I come to you, hey, Dr. J, I met with my PCP. He said I'm bordering on type 2 diabetes. I'm pre-diabetic for type 2 diabetes. I'm 36-year-old male. Hey, we're all in high stress because we're just coming out of the back end of these lockdowns and everything like that, right? Sure. So case study, I come to you. You're keeping an open mind. What does it look like? How are you going to help me? What would be some suggestions?
Well, I'd like to have some data out of the gates, right? So we have subjective data out of the gates. These are your symptoms, right? This is what's going on. These are the issues. These are the goals, things I want to work on, right? And then I'm going to look at some objective data. Let's grab your fasting blood glucose. Let's look at your fasting insulin. Let's do an A1C. Let's do a functional glucose tolerance test. Let's take a look at how your blood sugar responds to a meal. So we have glucose tolerance test. That's where they give you like 75 grams of a sugary substance, which doesn't correlate to anything in your real life unless you're drinking that much soda at a meal. It correlates nothing. So the goal is you want to see how your body responds to sugar 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, etc. And so the goal is the faster and the less swings your blood sugar has, the healthier your metabolism is. So ideally you choose a meal, come in, take a snapshot of that meal before you eat, fasting blood glucose, and then do a 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour or so. The goal is not to really go above 140 in that first hour because the data shows that you increase oxidative damage and organ damage and free radical stress when you go above 140. So ideally, 140 to 120 is kind of where we want to be or less. And ideally back below 100 inside of 2 to 3 hours, definitely hour 4. And so the goal of that is you can kind of get a window that if your blood sugar kind of snakes along and doesn't make these huge swings, we're also having less insulin surges and less inflammation as well.
Got it. Okay. I know.
So I typically have patients test like 2 or 3 random meals a week. And then I'll say, go and eat like crap, see what happens. And then also too, I've had patients do it where they were like, all right, they took a 1 hour, they did like an hour snapshot. They were at 140. They just did just 10 minutes on the elliptical, just getting their muscles moving. 10 minutes later, went down to 90 just because imagine all this glucose in your bloodstream. Well, if you see it's not a lot, right? So 100 mg per DL, that's like a good blood sugar. Let's say it's 140 mg per DL, right? That's only 1.4 teaspoons of sugar in a gallon and a half. So it's not a lot. Imagine a gallon and a half of water, you put 1.25 teaspoon. That's how much 140 is. So you can knock that down 30, 40% with just a little bit of movement. And so the first thing I say is if you're going to not eat good, go for that little bit of movement right after the meal. It makes a huge difference.
Okay. Yeah, that's some actionable strategies there. So just even going out and taking a walk after lunch, right? Or, whatever the case may be.
And if you're chronically in pain, I have patients who are chronically in pain, right? Just sit there. You contract every single muscle in your body for 5 seconds and then wait for 5 seconds and relax. And then just do that for 3 to 4 minutes. If you can't move because you're so in pain, just do an isometric.
Gotcha. Okay. Awesome.
That still works. Because think of it as this, right? What muscles, like part of what exercise does is one, when you exercise, you develop bigger muscles, you hypertrophy, especially if it's lifting, right? And then number two, you burn the glycogen in that muscle. And so glycogen is just stored glucose, stored sugar, essentially. And so what's that like? That's like taking this like sponge that's saturated, you wring the sponge out. Now all of its absorptive qualities come back, and now you can soak up more glucose in the bloodstream.
Yeah. Simple. I like it. I like that analogy. Okay. So I also know that you give some more mental health. And of course, I'm a mental health counselor. So I always like to learn and share some knowledge there. Let's dive into the emotional bucket real quick before we wrap up with EMF. Some emotional strategies, techniques, and tips that can help people to, reconnect to their greatness and health in their life.
Yeah. First thing is figure out the why, right? Figure out the why. Why are you doing this, right? There's got to be a deeper reason, whether it's financially, you're investing for your kids' future or for your family legacy, whether it's your health so you can go out and golf 18 holes and feel great, whether it's having the energy to spend time with your family. What's that why? So I think it's important to have that why. Number one, have the goals kind of listed out. I think that's, really important. And then outside of that, just remember, if you fall off the wagon, it's one decision to get back on the horse. A lot of people guilt themselves up and make themselves, feel really small and disempowered. But just remember, right? It's one decision to get back on, right? And then in regards to habits, right? It's no more effort to create a good habit than a bad habit. It's just repeatedly doing something. And if you've repeatedly done something the wrong way, that's just a habit. Now let's just try to string together those 30 days of doing the right thing, whether it's just, putting a water bottle on your desk and drinking good, clean, filtered water, whether it's that you make it a goal to get to bed before midnight, whether it's you just try to get 10,000 steps a day, just pick one thing and then just get that going. Once you have momentum and it's automatic, it becomes easy, then add the next thing. So you don't have to put 5 things on your desk, just get one thing, get it going, and then add the next thing once you have momentum. And then usually once you start seeing results and you start feeling better, it becomes automatic. Like you don't need the motivation to keep doing it. You're already sold in it.
Right. You only have to do something until you want to, and then you don't have to do it anymore.
Yeah, it's automatic. Anyone that's learned how to drive a stick shift knows this, right? It's like, okay, you're looking at the clutch, right? The clutch, then you're looking at the shifter, and then you're having to watch this while the car and the pedestrians. And then soon enough, now you're like downshifting and you're moving everything around. You go from 5th gear to 1st gear, whatever, 2nd gear, so it's kind of like that. So it's just like driving a standard, making it more like an automatic in your brain.
Yeah, love it. Okay, let's bring the plane in for a landing here with EMF. Share with the listeners what EMF is, how they're exposed to it, and what some of the dangers of it can be, and how they can limit their exposure to it.
Yeah, so EMF, electromagnetic frequency, right? I mean, your biggest source right here is going to be probably your phone, right? So the easiest thing you can do with that, like I have it in airplane mode right now, that's an easy thing you can do. Second thing you can do is get I get a little holster. Now, if you're extra sensitive, I put it on the back up by my glute, because really the biggest frequencies in those first couple of inches. So I try to keep it near like the largest amount of bone and tissue, i.e. my glute, right? Big hip, big glute muscles. So you have a lot of absorption. Biggest issue is if you're a female, do not put it here inside your bra. Big mistake. If you're a guy, don't put it in your pocket next to your genitals. Those are the biggest mistakes. So one, get a holster. If you really want, you can even cut the inner part of the holster and slip in some aluminum foil, and that will actually provide an EMF barrier between your phone and your body. So if you're more sensitive, you could do that. Second thing is you can just keep it in airplane mode most of the day and just turn it on when you want to use it. That's great too. Okay. And then I would say outside of that is you can get, you can wire your house with Cat 5 and do that instead. I don't do that. I think you have to be really sensitive to need to do some of those things. You can at least put your Wi-Fi on a Christmas tree timer and have it go off at nighttime between 10 and 8. So you don't have the EMF in your house at nighttime for the Wi-Fi. Again, a lot of these things are exponential based on how close you are. I mean, I have some meters. If you go 20, 30 feet away from the source, it just drops off. So just really look at where your EMF is, look at where your router is, make sure it's not going to be in areas of relaxation, near your bed, near your couch, where you're going to be relaxing. So really try to strategically keep those away from that. And you can get a good EMF meter, whether it's a tri-field meter or a safe and sound meter, and you can do a little investigation. You can always set these things on autopilot to go off at night, if you need more relaxation. And then outside of that, I think the big things really are going to be these 5G things, because the satellite towers on 5G are small, right? You go out and you see the older satellite towers, you can't miss them. They're huge, right? But the 5G ones are pretty small. They're pretty inconspicuous. And so, definitely making sure you don't have a 5G tower right across from your house or right on top of your kid's school, which those things can happen. But of course, EMF can increase a lot of the fungus or mold toxins in your gut, and they can create more toxins or more veracity. They can strengthen these critters. And so that's kind of how that works. But just do your best to master your phone, master your Wi-Fi. I mean, it's really impossible to get away from it. And so I think my thing is, do your best to manage your home, and then just get healthier where it becomes less of an issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're going to have towers around. You're going to walk into any public building. There's going to be Wi-Fi. So just do your best to get healthier so it becomes less of a problem. And of course, you can limit your exposure, at least in your house, with a bunch of those means. And of course, you could always do a grounding mat. You can always do grounding. There's some green wave EMF filters you can always put in your bedroom. There's different things like that you can do to create a healthier lifestyle on that front.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like, how do we find this healthy balance? Because if we spend so much time worrying about limiting our exposure to it, that can do just as much damage constantly worrying about it than actually being exposed to a little bit of it. Right?
Yeah, it's kind of like someone who's making 20 grand a year, and they're just like having to do this crazy budget, and they're just over the top with their budget. That's good, but it's easier just to take 20 grand a year and make 30 grand a year instead. And then that opens you up for having more options, right? So it's kind of like, increase your health income, so to speak, and then you don't have to micromanage things as much.
Right. Love it. So let's tie this all in here together, Dr. J. I think you presented a tremendous amount of very useful information. What would you like to share with the listeners about how they can reconnect to their greatness?
Yeah, I mean, out of the gate, just kind of try to find one thing, right? Find one thing. Maybe you make a list of 3, but you just act on that one thing today. And then once you get some momentum and it starts to reach that, unconscious competence level, right? You go from conscious uncompetence, right? Where conscious, you don't know what you don't know. Unconscious uncompetence, and there's conscious uncompetence. You start to know what you don't know. Then conscious competence, you know what you know, and then it's unconscious competence where it's automatic, right? And so we want to get you to that phase 4 where it's automatic. And so just try to stack these habits in here, get to that phase 4, that unconscious competence, and then add another one, and just keep on layering it on just like that. And then I would say, if you're at a point where you feel like you've gotten yourself as far as you can go, there's great resources. You can check out my podcast and my video page for more information to kind of fast track things. You can even reach out to someone like myself. Justinhealth.com is my site, where you could schedule a consult to dive in deeper if you want to really kind of look under the hood and figure out the root cause after you've kind of hit the wall, so to speak.
Awesome. Yeah, let's wrap up with that. So where can people get in touch with you, Dr. J? Yeah,
justinhealth.com. When you're there, there'll be a Work with Dr. J button. You can click it and you can schedule. There's also podcasts and video that are free where you can engage and get more information. I mean, I just try to empower as much people through education and just really giving them these good tips and just really getting the low-hanging fruit down, because that starts to get momentum.
Yeah, love it. Well, I'm so humbled and grateful that you took some time to join us today. Thank you so much, Dr. J. I appreciate it. To all the listeners, anybody watching, I highly encourage you to go check out Dr. J's website, his Instagram. He's got a lot of incredible knowledge here. Today was just a tip of the iceberg. No pun intended with that picture behind you. So.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. J.
Awesome, Ryan. Thanks for your podcast and the information you're putting out there. Really appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Hello to all of you out there. My name is Ryan Joseph Kopiar, and I want to invite you to come on this journey with me to learn more about healing and the holistic power of the mind-body connection. I think at the end of the day, we all want to live a happier, more joyful and fulfilled life. And my hope is that together on this journey, we can explore the mind-body connection and what it means to truly experience inner healing. So I want to thank you for joining me, and hopefully this will be an exciting journey that we can all take together.